Well, good afternoon if you are in the eastern part of the Americas. Good evening if you are in Europe or Africa. Bonsoir, nos amis en France. Special greetings always to our loved ones in Ukraine. We are with you. We support you. We send you all of our love and strength, and we wish you strength. And good morning to people elsewhere in the world. It's Friday, so this must be Fred Plotkin on Fridays on Adagio, the place where classical music happens. Adagio, as you know, is a video and audio streaming platform dedicated to supporting artists and to making classical music and opera available to music lovers all over the world. I'm Fred Plotkin, and my guest today is a dear friend who joins us from Montpellier, en France, in southern France. Isabelle Masset. Bonsoir, Isabelle.
Bonsoir, and good afternoon to everybody. Good evening to the friends as well.
Yes, Isabelle we're in the same age category, but she has a long and storied career in arts management and administration. And she is one of those people without whom opera would be a lot poorer. I can tell you that. I've known of her work well before I met her. And we are going to talk today about her career, much of which, not all of which, but much of which was centered in Bordeaux in southwestern France. And it's very special theater there. But also in general, your life working in France. I picked today's date, which is July 8th of 2022, because it falls precisely between the 4th of July in America and the 14th of July, Bastille Day in France. So there is a very strong relationship, understandably, between France and the United States. And people usually talk about Paris and New York, but I'm going to talk about Bordeaux and the United States, and not just for wine. A bit of history. Bordeaux has about 1 million people in the metropolitan area. It's the 9th largest city in France. It's on the Garonne River near the Atlantic Ocean. And Bordeaux was under the Roman Empire from 60 BC to 418 AD. It is the Romans who brought wine grapes to that area of the world. It is they who, frankly, planted wine grapes to give the Roman legions, the troops, wine. But then the local people of the area discovered, number one, the soils, the particular characteristics that made that area so congenial for wine growing. I'm going to fast forward a few centuries. It was under England between the 12th and 15th centuries, and that makes it very distinct in France, in that southwestern France, the Bordeaux area, has always had a very strong relationship with England. At that time, it was Henry II Plantagenet who married Eleanor of Aquitaine. And if you know the film The Lion in Winter, think of Peter O'Toole and Katharine Hepburn. It was in this period that England became the leading market for Bordelais wine, for what they call claret. And in England, for a long time, when I was a young man and tasting wines, and they would say, have a claret. And I would say, well, this tastes like Bordeaux. It tastes like a Bordeaux blend. Well, it is from Bordeaux, but it's a claret. And in my study of wine, I've come to discover that the British and their wine journalism, their wine knowledge, is based largely on their relationship to the Bordeaux area. And many people I know in France say that the most traditional and classic French wines are those from Burgundy, from the Loire Valley, some Saumur, other places like that. Excuse me, and also in eastern France, where there's the Alsatian wine industry, which is somewhat different. Bordeaux in the 18th century had its golden age, and when you visit Bordeaux, you see an absolutely gorgeous city center made of the stone that was used in the cave, in the caves where the wine would be aged and stored. It's a beautiful sort of golden stone. And when the sun sets on the Garonne River, in Western France over the Atlantic Ocean. The entire city takes on a golden color, which is absolutely gorgeous. And in the center of the city is called the Porte de la Lune, the Port of the Moon. This was France's busiest port and the second busiest port in the world after London. And it was used for the importation of coffee, sugar, cocoa, cotton, many products from the Americas, from Africa. Unfortunately, it was also the center of the slave trade in Europe for a very, very long time. Bordeaux had the very first American consulate. It was not London, obviously, because we had a revolution. It was not Paris. It was not any number of other places. It was Bordeaux. And unfortunately, I believe President Bill Clinton in the 1990s, for reasons of economy, closed a few American consulates, embassies, and institutions, including the library in Milan that was the US Library in Milan, and the oldest American consulate, namely the consulate in Bordeaux. In this period of the 18th century, they also built the Grand Théâtre de Bordeaux, which is one of the most beautiful opera houses in the world. It is about a century older than the Garnier Opera House in Paris. The Grand Staircase in Bordeaux influenced the design of the Grand Staircase in Paris. This theater is viewed as a temple of arts and light, and it looks in a way like the Madeleine Church in Paris. It has 12 Corinthian-style columns. It has 12 statues of women, 9 muses and 3 goddesses, Juno, Venus, and Minerva. The depiction indoors depicts the 3 sources of wealth for Bordeaux. Unfortunately, for one of them is slaves. The other 2 are wine and the sea itself. It was this money, frankly, that built the beautiful city center, but it remains a magnificent theater. It was completely restored in 1991 to its original blue and gold interior. So, Isabelle, you were for many, many years I think in English we would call it artistic administrator of the Grand Théâtre of Bordeaux. It had a different title in French, but it's really that in English. And so how did you get there? And tell us about the theater itself from your point of view, just working in a place that is so physically magnificent. It must be inspiring when you're in that environment.
There is not one day when I entered the Bordeaux Opera House where I was not aware of walking on history. It's when I arrived in Bordeaux in 1990, which was just, the theater was closed. It was the new intendant, Alain Lombard, who was the famous conductor, and with Jacques Chaban-Delmas, who was the mayor, and they have decided to restore, to bring the Bordeaux Opera House to his original colors. And so the first piece that opened was Zauberflöte. It was every corner of this house, every corridor, every door, everything is gorgeous. And you, of course, Garnier, as you said, Charles Garnier was making the trip to Bordeaux and was sitting in front and was taking inspiration for the beautiful Opéra de Paris. But it's a house which is, it's not really Baroque. It's more what we would call French classic. I am not a specialist in architecture, but it is almost as old, I think, as Napoli. Then you go to Bologna, and then you have all the croissant Baroque, that goes then to Bayreuth, but the old
the Margraville Opera House. So it's neoclassical.
Yes. And Prague and all of those houses, which were old houses. And
just for reference, the Teatro San Carlo in Naples opened in 1736. the opera house, the Teatro Comunale in Bologna, opened in 1763 or 68. I think 1763.
And I think Bordeaux, correct me, was 18.
17.
No, 1791, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
A little bit before the French Revolution, I think. So it's, you don't work there. I mean, I didn't work there without feeling this history. And the house is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's a small pit. It was a little bit enlarged because Lombard is a conductor who liked to have a tour, but it didn't modify it. And anyway, the pit was not originally like that. It was a salle de concert inside, and the house. What is beautiful about this theater is that it was almost not. It didn't have drastic change in his original architecture. Only the salle de concert was in the Grand Foyer, which was completely redone during the 19th century because it was the avènement of the bourgeoisie, and you had to go with your wife, long dress, and have the ball that was there. So it's all of that about Bordeaux. So Bordeaux, I arrived in Bordeaux. Previously, I was working in the Opéra du Rhin in Strasbourg, and which was it's a very, very also good house. Three houses were there. And I met there Alain Lombard, and he invited me because he was taking the new aventure to build a new season and a new era in the Bordeaux Opera House, and I was with him. And then after 4 years, he left Bordeaux, and his successor was Thierry Fouquet, who was already a friend, who became even closer friend, and who was my boss during almost 20 years that we worked together.
So before that,
yes,
you worked for an arts management company.
Yes.
Which is to say the management of singers, of conductors, and so on.
That was actually, I worked for this. Oh my God, if we go en l'envers, it's complicated. It would be better if we start by the beginning. The beginning was...
Well, you were born in Montpellier.
Montpellier here, which that would be another meeting, okay, one other discussion. Because Montpellier the Languedoc is the real city for wine, is a real city for, my father was a winemaker, and here in this country, it is wine. And I wonder if, of course, it was also brought by the Romain, and my mother was Spanish, and the empire was going also to Spain. So we are completely with wine history here too. I am from here, and I left when I was 15, I met this wonderful artist that changed all of my life, who was Régine Crespin. Régine was like my idol. I adored her. I was still at school, and I became just a fan. It was in 1971 that I discovered her, the year that it was in the Festival d'Orange, and she was singing La Damnation de Faust. In the same year was Caballé singing El Trovatore, and I was discovering this. And after, I don't know why I have in my mind that Tristan with Nielsen and Vickers and Böhm was on 71. I think it's 72, but I mean, it was the thing that I discovered. And then, of course, I was 16. I became the world specialist of the opera. And I have I was very opinionated, and I have definitive opinions about everything. So I was listening some records, and I was I was taking everything, and listening and making my ears work, etc. And I was writing to Régine. I was still at school, okay? And it was, well, here I heard this record that you did, that you were wonderful, but so and so, I didn't really like them. I was, just a monster probably. Anyway, Régine was giving a recital in the South, and I wrote her and I said, Régine, please write me a letter and tell me that you invite me, because otherwise my parents won't let me go. I was really young. Régine wrote, I still have the letter, wrote me with a pink feutre, and tell, dear Isabelle, your letter was very sweet. I would be so happy to know you better. I am giving a recital here in Salon de Provence or in Aix, and please, I would be so happy if you could come. So we went there with a friend of mine who could drive, that my parents trust, and we went there with my friend Mado to see Régine. And then she said, oh, but listen, why don't you come in tomorrow and we have a little lunch together, so I will know you and it will be nice. She was just nice, Why did she do that to me? I mean, anyway, the day after we arrived in this very fancy, elegant hotel, I was completely moved to see my idol. And Régine told me, before we joined the two friends there, she took my arm and she told me, listen, your letters are very sweet and they touch me very much. But if you want you and me to stay friends, please never say anything more, or never tell me bad things about other singers. They are my colleague. I know the work that they have done to go there, and I don't think it's appropriate for a 16-year-old little girl to say or to write anything else than that you wrote. So I started to, and she told me, don't cry. I told you, let's turn the page. How are you, darling? Who are you? That was, and this lesson was one of my two legs in my work. You just love the artist. But artists have, well, it's not only always the glory or the thing that we see that we love, the hard work that they do, that needs just respect.
My comparable experience to everything you relate was Mirella Freni. And I was not 16, I was a little older, but not too much older. And it was the same thing of, we are colleagues. And I've told this story before, so I'm not going to tell it here, but basically it was when I was a very young man working at La Scala, and she called me into her dressing room and explained to me that we're all colleagues. We know how hard this is. We support one another. I'm not a singer, she was a singer, but nonetheless, we all do this together to make an opera happen. And I think it's very important for any of us who think to work in opera that someone like a Régine Crespin or a Mirella Freni take us when we are very young and tell us the rules.
And those rules I always have been trying to also teach them, because I very often tell this little story about Régine and how that's changed my life, changed my rapport to the métier. And so I made some little month of studying singing in the conservatoire, in the music school in Montpellier, enough to realize that I didn't have what I wanted to hear. So that was very, very brief. But I wanted to be in the opera world. So I got a job in Paris, and then I met a friend who was Jacques Cousinet, who died, but it's nice to say his word. And I think I remember meeting him. It was the Lulu, the third act, the Chéreau. Boulez. What is Stratas, I think? The Paris.
Maybe Stratus or Evelyn Lear, maybe someone like that. So Paris about 1977 or so, yeah.
That was that, and he told me, "Oh, but come to work in the office." And he was working in an opera agency, who was run by Dr. Germinal Hilbert, who was a perfect gentleman, who is still a perfect gentleman. I don't see him often enough. And at the time, the agency worked for Leonie Rizanek, Birgit Nilsson. Okay, they were already ladies, and young Jessie Norman, and young Barbara Hendricks, and young and Gwyneth Jones. So I worked there, and I was also, because when the theater is calling to see, can you tell me if Barbara Hendricks is free? Barbara at the time, I mean, she was just a rising, wonderful star, very loved, and everybody wanted her. And so, but she was hardly free because she was very busy. But then you said, oh, you are doing, or you want Barbara to sing Micaela. Okay, she's free, she's not free, you do the job. And then you said, but if you do Carmen, then you need a Frasquita, a Mercedes, I can introduce you to young French singers, la, 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 la. So that, and I was following young singers who were just going at the Paris Opera, the Conservatoire, making, so I started the job like this. And I was also going to the airport, picking up Jessie when she was coming with the luggage. And I remember carrying the big, Jessie was like a vaisseau, I remember beautiful concert in the Notre Dame de Paris, and she had one of those Jessie dresses, and the train was very long. And so she said, darling, can you please, so I was like a page holding a big dress, and I was following her. I mean, I was nobody, I was just like a little mosquito, you see, and I was feeling the fervor of the people who saw her, and I was blushing. I said, oh my God, this is why I am so happy. I would never have the nerve to be on stage and to sing. I mean, the nerve that you must have, the strong that you must have to do this. So that was, but that was physical. This experience, I still have it. So that is when, and then by knowing Régine, because I became very close with Régine, and she was a little bit like a mother for me, really. And I was going to holidays with her in Spain, and she was very good friends with Terry McEwen, who had left London Records to Decca to take San Francisco. And so
I'm just going to expand that further. Terry McEwen was an arts executive at Decca London Records, who became the head of the San Francisco Opera, and with that brought a raft of singers, of great singers. And when Terry got there, he was not equally good at all aspects of his job. But what he did was he turned San Francisco Opera into a mecca for great singers.
So, and Régine, who had already previously sung at San Francisco, she loved the city. She adored singing in the United States, as you know. She was a fan of the Metropolitan Opera. She sang in Chicago and San Francisco. So here, every summer, I met Terry, and Terry was an opera fan and lover, and he was, and I said, Terry, please take me to San Francisco. And he told me, darling, when you will come to San Francisco, you will be like me. San Francisco is far away. It's better if I have you in Europe. And sometimes I can tell you, hey, Isa, could you go to Berlin, to whatever? So a few times, not often, because he was traveling himself, and I didn't have the position officially, of course. But he told me, listen, you have been there. How was, this kind of talk that you have with friends that you share the same taste. And then the year after, Terry, why don't you take me in San Francisco? And he told me, listen, darling, you have never worked in an opera house. San Francisco is a big opera house. I cannot take you there if you don't have an experience in an opera house. At the time, I remind you, I was still working in the opera agency. So I said, okay, I'm going to work in a theater at the time. And I met a friend who told me, but you know that your Elisabeth Pezzino, who is living La Monnaie, and why don't you call her?
Brussels.
Brussels. Yeah. So I called Elisabeth, and I told Elisabeth, is it right that you leave? And she told me, yes, I want to go home with my husband, Leonard, for the children. And I said, but why do you think I could take your job? And she told me, let me ask Gérard Mortier. And 2 days after, I have Gérard Mortier on the phone to tell me, oh, Isabelle, I would be delighted. I remember you, blah, 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 blah. And I would be so happy if you could come to La Monnaie. So I came, I left Paris. I went to Brussels. I stayed there 1 year, and working with Mortier was, of course, absolutely wonderful. And I learned a lot of things. I was working, but at the artistic, making the contracts and all these kind of things. And then I had an opportunity to go to Strasbourg to have a better position. And I stayed in Strasbourg, in Alsace, during like 7 years. And of course, it was in Strasbourg. It's always, my life was also very connected with wines. You had this wonderful introduction about Bordeaux. And then I love the Burgundy wine, the Alsace wine, and then Alain Lombard, that I met in Strasbourg when he was invited as a guest. He was not anymore working there. Who told me, please come I would like to have you in Bordeaux. And then I left Strasbourg and went to Bordeaux, where I stayed many, many years and discovered and loved the Bordeaux wine, of course.
So I want to take you back just to one question about Jesse Norman. On July 14th of 1989, in other words, exactly 200 years after the storming of the Bastille, July 14, 1789, there was a huge celebration in Paris. And what famous French singer was chosen to sing La Marseillaise, the national anthem? Jesse Norman.
Yes, of course.
Augusta, Georgia.
Yeah. Some people are complaining, say, why didn't they take French singers, la, 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 la. And I remember, in Régine Crespin, she was too old, to have done it. But she said she's the perfect symbol. So she's the voice. So that was it. Anyway, I am also very, very French. In Bordeaux, in Strasbourg, and in Bordeaux, with my different boss, for number one, we always have been very, very supportive of French singers. And people like in Bordeaux, we had the first step of Florian Sampé, who is one of the leading young generation of baritones. We had almost one of the first contract of Ludovic Tézier. He was singing,
now a world famous baritone.
Yes, I think he was singing Marullo. Maybe if I don't say stupid things in Rigoletto. We had a wonderful French singer called Mireille Delange. And we have Stanislas de Barberac also started later. He's one of those. And Bernheim, who is French Swiss.
Benjamin Bernheim,
Bernheim, he sang Cassio in Bordeaux. So we were always interested in young. And who did her debut in France, in Bordeaux, was Nina Stemme. Being the young Nina Stemme, having won Domingo competition, and we heard her. My boss sent me to hear her in, don't know what, in the north of Europe, whatever. And we took her for Santa, so that was her first debut
in the Flying Dutchman. So I'm going to interrupt a bit because I want listeners to know that one of the reasons why I wanted you to be my guest today is because I've been very aware on this program in the past 2+ years that I've not given enough attention to France, not for lack of trying, but I was looking for really the right guest to talk about opera in France because, as you know, I've worked at the Paris Opera, the Bastille primarily, but a little bit the Garnier. I have worked once at the Opera in Nice. I've worked once at the Opera in Monte Carlo, which is kind of France. And I've worked several times at the Festival of Aix-en-Provence and once in Bordeaux, but you were not there. And so therefore, people, when they say opera in France, they tend to think Paris. But
Yeah.
when I look at the map of France, there is so much opera happening in southern France, which is to say, from Nice to Bordeaux. There are festivals, there's Montpellier.
Yeah.
I don't know if Toulouse counts as southern or south central France.
No, you have Bordeaux, Toulouse, Montpellier, then you have Avignon.
Avignon as well, yeah.
Avignon, Marseille, Toulon, Nice, Monte Carlo. Okay, Monte Carlo is almost France. Okay,
and it's then on the French National Railway.
then you have Lyon, you have Saint-Étienne, you have Vichy, also with a beautiful tradition of the festival when Vichy was, Strauss himself conducted in Vichy, which is a gorgeous little city. And then you have all the city, you have Nantes, Angers, Rennes, this is for the French Brittany, and then you have Paris, of course, and then you have Lille, and we have Nancy, gorgeous place.
Yeah.
And then you have l'Opéra du Rhin, which is Strasbourg, Colmar, and Mulhouse. Mm-hmm. I hope that I didn't forget any. I mean, with that, and the work there has been always extremely serious. The French singers have, with all those houses, beautiful access to work and to develop, mm-hmm. And it is something that we did a lot when I was working in Strasbourg and in Bordeaux. Thierry Fouquet was also very open, and we were also very, very open to the young artist program in United States. I was trying to make, listen, if we had Jennifer Holloway, Stephen Costello, Leah Crocetto, Elizabeth Deschamps, Isabel Leonard, Heidi Melton, Stuart Skelton, David Lomelí, Melody Moore, Leonardo Capalbo, Brenda Ray, Anna Christie, Alex Schrader, of many of that, and Elsa van den Heever, who also come from the San Francisco Young Artist Program. So that was also, we were going there very often, and we made mixed. And this is when you work on this position as artistic administration, you need to rely also, and this is where you create friendship and a good relation with agents. And this is where agents are so important for the development of careers. And this is where you meet somebody like, you meet those beautiful ears that can tell you, you should go and hear this one. I mean, one of the most famous is Matthew Epstein, who was working at the Columbia and who was also had protégé and was trying to help them to tell, okay, now you should go and spend 3 years in Germany, or you try to go and so that all building a career at that level is important.
And I'm just going to interrupt. Matthew Epstein, for people who don't know him, I've known Matthew for decades, is a New Yorker who fell in love with opera, who followed a similar path to yours and had administrative posts at the Lyric Opera of Chicago and in Wales, but also at Welsh National Opera, but also has been an advisor to many singers and to companies. part of why I asked you about Bordeaux in France and then the development of French singers goes back to what I was saying about the American consulate in Bordeaux. That because Bordeaux, the city, has had an openness to the English-speaking world, first England itself, but also the United States of America, those relationships that you described were natural. Whereas my being a New Yorker, we were Paris focused. And there were many direct relationships between the Metropolitan Opera where I worked and the Opéra de Paris, which was the Bastille and the Garnier. So there was a lot of exchange between those two theaters only. And when I went to work in Paris, including the Atelier, which is the Young Artist Program of Paris, very fine program, it was a feeder to the Met, in effect, and a feeder to La Scala, in effect. And it was, to some degree, London, but it was more Bordeaux in London. It was more Bordeaux in the British Isles. It was more Bordeaux and San Francisco, as you described. And it's very important because, as you properly said, so many singers from North America or based in North America, like Elsa van den Haver, who's South African, but did a lot of her study and preparation in the United States, came to France via Bordeaux, via the Golden Port, as we were describing it earlier, and the Port of the Moon, rather. And it's very interesting because I know that I, being a New Yorker, was always Paris focused until I had opportunities to work elsewhere. And the reality of opera in France is extraordinary. The government gives a huge amount of support to the arts in a way that really only Finland and Austria can rival, and Germany to a large degree too. Spain somewhat, Italy a little bit, England sort of a little bit, the United States really not much at all, and from a governmental point of view. And so I think one could stay in France, have a career in France, travel around France, eat and drink incredibly well as while you're going to the opera and working in the opera. Recently, my guest was Jochen Breiholz, who is a German who has the equivalent of your job in Lyon.
In Lyon, yes, who came
And
from
the
Vienna.
conductor there, Daniele Rustioni, is a Milanese, he's an Italian, and he is there. And I know they're both incredibly happy because the environment for working, yes, Paris or France has a lot of strikes, grève, more than certain other countries, and labor actions, but the dedication to the creation and the promotion of art in France, and art in all of its forms, is to me profoundly inspirational. And you know me more from my Italian life, but I have had a considerable amount of study and time living in France, mostly Paris and Nice, and learning the language and learning what I can only call French values. The French approach to reason as opposed to clinical analysis, but raison, which is something other than that. And I identify with it very deeply. And part of my love for France is not the obvious of the food and the wine and the beautiful and the art and all that, and the fashion and the people who I love, but really the French approach to solving a problem, to reasoning, to thinking things through, to creating something that is functional, often idiosyncratic, but often very beautiful. And that element of beauty added to function is something that well before it was described by architects in, say, the Netherlands and Germany and Austria, existed in France and Italy as a value.
I agree with you.
So, yes.
No, I agree completely with you. But of course, as we do it very natural, I didn't see that it was such a quality, such a thing.
And that was really my question. Growing up in that environment, were you aware of the things that I'm describing as someone who's an outsider who has immense esteem for the way the French people do a lot of things? Not everything,
Not everything. Yes, of course, when you travel abroad and when you come back, you say, wow, that's not bad. Yeah, for many, we are very lucky. We are a beautiful little country. I mean, little country compared to yours, if you see what I mean. Yes, I think I was aware of that.
So I'm going to go back now to beloved Régine Crespin. I did not have the deep relationship with her that you did, but I knew her and admired her. And she taught me one thing that I use in teaching all the time that maybe she said to you as well, maybe not because you spoke in French to her. Il faut vivre la langue. You must live the language. In other words, if you're an opera singer and you're singing a role in German or Italian or English, and her English was fantastic as a singer, not only must you learn the language, the pronunciation, the vowels, the meaning of the words, but you must live the language and therefore have a total connection to the experience of the character in the opera. Let's say she's singing the Marschallin, which she was a magnificent Marschallin in the Rosenkavalier. That's not just in German, that's in high Viennese as opposed to rustic Viennese or Styrian Baronoxus from Styria. And therefore these little finesses that would exist within the characters that she was, she, the Marschallin, 1732, spoke a kind of high Viennese Austrian German that was folkloric, but also very correct and was different from some of the other characters. And
remember something. Régine was, she wrote on her, you can read that on her memoir. She was living with the conductor, so the conductor who also could teach her. He was the first love, the first big love of her life. And then the second love of her life that she married was her husband, Lou Bruder, who was a German professor d'allemand agrégé, which means it's the highest diploma that you have in France. So he could go on the slightest detail, and he was feeding her with a lot of things until she couldn't take it anymore. But of course, she was taking it. So she was half Italian. So Italian was there, French. What Régine had, which is, I mean, many things that she has were incomparable, but she had this natural eloquence, this elocution, the way she sounds in French, this noblesse that she gives to the words is unique. But this is, you cannot force that. Even some singers, you tell them, okay, the articulation, the pronunciation is not very good. And so they try to, I think it has also to come with the way French sounds a little bit here in the mask, but some other non-French singers had a perfect French. Nowadays we have Michael Spires, who is a perfect. Some American singers were sounding as French as Georges Thiel or Roberto Alagna or Ludovic. See, it's all, but so that Régine had that perfect way of putting the words together.
But never with exaggeration. To go back to our beloved Jessie Norman, who I knew well and worked with a lot, she could overpronounce her French and her German.
A little bit.
A little bit when she chose to for effect. So when she did a recording, not a stage performance of Carmen, and Frappez-moi donc was toward the end of the opera was so over the top that it didn't have the diffidence that Régine Crespin had when she sang it. Frappez-moi donc. In other words, if you must, you must. But with Jessie Norman, it was a huge taunt. It was almost a mini mad scene right there. And that's why when I introduce people to French repertory and Régine Crespin is doing it, I indicate her as a model. Now, I want to mention a couple of things, especially for English language listeners. Régine Crespin wrote this magnificent book I believe the English title is On Stage, Off Stage.
Yes.
And the English language translation was by a woman named Gladys Bourdain,
Yes. Yes.
Bourdain.
Gladys. Yes.
So, um, you know, Isabelle, that I refer to something as planet opera, that those of us in our world who work in opera live on planet opera. You and I are residents of planet opera. We are not the famous ones like the Crespin and the Normans,
Yes.
and the singers and the conductors and the stage directors, but we have our part as well. And Gladys Bourdain was part of Planet Opera in a very unusual way. She was a reporter for the New York Times. She was of French origin. Her very famous son was Anthony Bourdain, who millions and
Yes.
millions of people knew.
Of course.
And I, in my life as a food writer, not critic, but food writer, came to know Anthony Bourdain, but he was very surprised that I knew his mother for 20
You
years
should
before,
not. Yes.
because Gladys loved opera. When I was performance manager of the Met, Gladys would come. And when Régine would be there and Gladys would be there, we, the three of us, would often sit down and talk about opera and language and food and so forth. And did you know Gladys Bourdain, who
Oh, yeah.
died not too long ago? Yeah.
Of course I do, Gladys.
Talk about Gladys, because a very special figure. And when her son became famous, people forgot Gladys.
Gladys was wonderful. She could also be sometimes so dramatic and sometimes she was over the top. Oh my God, she was, but she adored Régine. They fought together a lot because Gladys wanted to sometimes decide what Régine had to do or not to do. And you don't say that to Régine, and you don't say that to Régine Crespin. Even if you are the best friend, Régine is Régine, and that's it. So that sometimes it was their life together of many years of friendship had highs and down. But she was extremely loving, and she loved Régine. She helped her to translate the book in English. She made for the people who can also read it in French, I think it's also very interesting. First hand by Régine, because Régine wrote it herself. Okay, it was not dictated, and I don't know. I know Gladys so well that I cannot. She,
like her son, were very dramatic, a bit over the top, could be difficult, had their devils within them, I think it's fair to say. It was very tragic when Anthony Bourdain killed himself in France. And Gladys suffered for that. And I saw her after. And because I was one of the few people who knew her and her son, but knew her enough that she could speak candidly to me about what she really was feeling, rather than the public image. And then she had a long illness, and it's terrible to bury your child, obviously, and especially when he's committed suicide, and especially because everything about him, he said, his drug use, his opinions, whatever they were, and a lot of them were fascinating, his taste. He was, I always felt that he was a bomb waiting to explode. And unfortunately that was the case. And she knew it too. And that was the source of great torment to her.
And she had those two beautiful sons, Christopher and Anthony, and Christopher took care of her mother after on the last years. I don't know him too much. I never met personally Anthony. I would have loved to know him because she was, and Gladys was very proud of her two children. I think she was.
But it's interesting when a person of her great accomplishment was practically eclipsed by her son. in terms of fame and so on. She was an editor at the New York Times, among the first women editors. She really knew opera. She knew everything relating to the French language, French history, French culture, and was a big advocate for it here in New York at a time when France in New York meant fine dining. It meant excellent wines were imported. It meant perfume. It meant fashion, but not culture, not tradition, not philosophy. She would promote cinema, interesting French cinema in New York,
Yes,
as
yes.
opposed to the latest La Cage aux Folles, which is fun. We love La Cage aux Folles, but the latest film with Jean Moreau, she would have Jean Moreau come to New York and speak, or different French actors. And she once had me interview Catherine Deneuve, which was
Yes.
which was heavenly, I will say.
But you know that it is because of Grace, grâce à Gladys, or because of Gladys.
Thanks to Gladys, yeah.
Thanks to Gladys, thank you. That she, when Régine retired, she had a glorious party at the Opera News, and the Met was giving farewell in San Francisco. And she had a beautiful gala also at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, but she really put together those two evenings. It was at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées and at the Paris de Garnier with La Robe, which is l'Association pour le rayonnement de l'Opéra de Paris, and she convinced them, you must do something for Régine, and that was absolutely wonderful. And you know that in 2027 will be the 100th. It will be
centennial, February 23rd, 2027.
2027 will be 100 years of Regine's birthday, and I know that Alexandre Neff knows it, so we hope that.
Alexander Neff being the head of the Paris Opera, who was my guest about a year ago on this program. So let's stick with Régine, because there's so much I could always ask about her. Although obviously she was French and she was a supreme French artist, many people know her better for her German language performances and her German repertory, whether it was the Marshall and whether it was Sieglinde. She was a magnificent Sieglinde, an excellent Brunhilde, but also Elsa in Lohengrin, and all of these roles. She was a natural for many of the Wagnerian roles more than the Strauss, a couple of Strauss, but
and Kundry, she made her debut, and she made her debut in Bayreuth for Kundry. She thought that she would go there to sing what she called the blonde, like Elsa or Elisabeth, and Wieland and Vogt, he told her, no, we want you to sing Kundry. I want a Mediterranean Kundry, not those dark voices. I want this
in Parsifal, just so our listeners know, in the opera Parsifal. Yeah.
Yes, conducted by Knappersbusch. So she was very versatile, because if you hear her singing Italian, she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
She's so. And the French, you know, I really love French music as well. I mean, on the list that I made five. No, I should have written like a list of 1,000, because every piece from even the Spanish music to Bartók to Strauss to Berg, everything is gorgeous, and French music is gorgeous. I know that I put an extrait of Péléas by Debussy. You play when the first second start, when I go and hear Péléas, I'm just in tears. It gets me in the heart. Why am I talking about Debussy?
So let me stop for a second, just so listeners.
Yes, because you started talking German, and I go.
Wait. I want to add something for listeners, because just in case someone is coming to Fred Plotkin on Fridays for the first time, I ask my guests to always provide a list of selections from the Adagio catalog that personally inspire them, whether it's the music, whether it's the performer, or both, in a way that after listening to our conversation, the viewer can then go to the Adagio catalog and listen to your suggestions, and they will be on the page that accompanies this particular conversation. So, Régine Crespin auf Deutsch, she did some of the greatest performances of her career were in German language roles. And, you know, you know that I've said to you numerous times, and audiences know that maybe my greatest composer hero, there are two, is Giuseppe Verdi and Hector Berlioz. And Berlioz was more popular in the German-speaking world than the French world. And Les Troyens was done in Germany, in Karlsruhe. And Wagner appreciated and admired Berlioz more than many French musicians and composers. And Crespin, in some ways, not that she wasn't admired in France, but she was especially admired in places where she did her German language roles. Why is that? Because
listen, she, at the time when she was blooming as becoming the Crespin, the famous singers, who was performing Berlioz? Almost nobody. The EMI, the EMI recording, she was doing this with Georges Prêtre. They wanted to record Les Troyens, and they said, okay, we do it in one record. And I think Régine and Prêtre were on their knees telling, give us two records. They could have recorded having the singers that they had at the time, Régine being the best Cassandra and the best Didon. They should have recorded the complete piece. No, who did it? The British, Colin Davis.
Colin Davis, yeah.
So who was, and Régine, also, if we talk about French, Gluck, okay, Iphigénie en Tauride, is a gorgeous French piece. Who was doing it? Not very much people. She brought that, being the famous singer that she was, she brought Les Troyens, she brought Iphigénie to places like Le Théâtre Colonne, to places like in some concert. She brought Marie-Madeleine in Carnegie Hall. So, you know, she was, and of course, people were not performing that much Berlioz at the time.
Yeah.
So in Bayreuth, when she started, of course, she had to sing Wagner. And then when she sang in Vienna, when she sang in Salzburg, she sang Wagner as well. She sang Sieglinde. Because nobody at the time was doing the big Berlioz.
Well, I understand that, and I agree with you. But I think part of what I'm after is that she was really fantastic in these Wagner roles.
She was.
And therefore, I understand why they asked her to do that. And I understand why she was so beloved in Bayreuth and in Austria and different places, and also New York for a variety of roles. She was a fantastic Tosca here in New York.
Yes.
That was an amazing, amazing Tosca that really changed. She and Grace Bumbry were my early Toscas who changed my view about Tosca and because I saw Callas in her last Met performance, but I didn't understand at 9 years old what I was seeing. So I cannot say that Maria Callas changed my view of Tosca. But when I was older and I saw Crespin and Grace Bumbry, that's what made me see the greatness. And they were very different kinds of performers, but both could make Tosca really something special.
Yes.
But, you know, I think Crespin could have, if she wanted to, had a career primarily in German.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And, you know, that interests me. It's not like being Swedish, where there are not that many Swedish operas. So that, you know, if you're Birgit Nilsson or Nina Stemma, you sing the roles in German. Or Lisa Davidson now from Norway, you do those roles that are suited to your voice. We were talking before about Elsa van den Haver, who I think is outstanding, as you know. because she does bel canto, she does Donizetti, she does Mozart, she does Handel, she does Wagner, she does Strauss. And that's a different kind of singer who's not pigeonholed the way that, unfortunately, Régine Crespin, I think, was viewed as the great Wagnerian, or one of them, along with Nielsen and Rieseneck, and therefore confined to that. Jessie Norman always, did not want to be pigeonholed, and she said, "Pigeonholes are only for pigeons."
Yes.
But I think the reason I bring all this up is because, not you certainly, but there are many artist managers who stick to what they think is tried and true and what they know. And therefore, if Crespin was great in Bayreuth and Vienna and Berlin and Munich, let's have her do it in New York and San Francisco, some of the same things. Whereas you, because I know you, and certain other artist managers, whether as representatives as artists or artistic directors of theaters such as Bordeaux, seek to bring the different, the new, the original, the special. And, I've known many fine singers who have been very pigeonholed in their careers, and it frustrates them because, yes, you could be a great Electra, a great Brunhilde, and that's fantastic. But sometimes they want to sing La Gioconda.
Of course. But of course, and that is those singers who are now, if you start your career singing, if you put the fingers, if you are going to be telling, okay, you are going to sing Sieglinde, Brunhilde, and then people won't give you that. So, and this is where agents are important, because they said, okay, you want, we talked about Nina, you want Nina Stimme to sing Brunhilde, to sing. She has contracts until 4 years from now to sing those parts. But if you propose her to sing Fanciulla del West or Aida or whatever, she will come, even in a place where, because she wants to try that on her, to add that to her repertoire. And Nina has, Nina has been doing whatever she wants, where she wants, and I adore her. But it's the same thing for Lise Davidsen or for Elsa van den Jever. If you start to give them only the big thing, they will tell you, no, I want to sing Don Carlo, I want to sing Desdemona. They want I want to sing Handel because I want to still have the flexibility in my voice. So then this is and the people who know the most about voices are the singers themselves. I know that when I was working we always took our singers for lunch, and then you chat. In France, you don't eat a sandwich for lunch, you take 2 hours. It's the way it is. This is part of it I like. For me, it was a way to decompress a little bit, and then you talk and you tell, okay, if you talk to a young baritone called Florian Sampé, Florian, okay, you have this, what does your teacher want you to do? What would you like to do? This kind of confiance, and then you see if you can propose that. We did this with Mireille Delange, who was a wonderful artist and acting singer, and she was always. Thierry Fouquet gave her extremely specific, what I call rendezvous to a part, and that she was there and delivering something extraordinary. So,
you mentioned taking singers out for lunch in France, which
yes,
is heaven, and talking about repertory. I can tell you in my career experience that sometimes singers want to get together with me to talk about this kind of thing and what I would recommend for them. But then there are many other singers who, if I even propose something like a lunch, will say, well, please talk to my agent, please talk to my manager, and let
Oh,
them sort this out. And
yeah.
they don't want to express their opinions or feelings.
This is absolute, and they are right. Okay, managers, when managers are good managers, they are there to do the job. The job for an artist is extremely important. I think I could do that because I was working in an agency, so I know how to trust an agent, and I always trust an agent. Some people, you know, and the artistic administration, they despise agents telling me they no, because when you are in trouble, when you have somebody sick, when you have, who do you call? You call the agents, and agents have to be trusted, and they know their job. And it is, you never, of course, for me, it was like a privilege, like a friendship to talk with an artist about to hear it from him. But then, of course, you go through the agent.
I guess I can say in my case, and I imagine this is your case too, that there are many people we work with on Planet Opera who we are professionally collegial with and take that point of view. But then we form friendships, so that you had a friendship with Régine Crespin. I would say there are 7 or 8 opera singers and conductors who are my actual close, dear friends. And I speak to them differently than I would someone else who is just a friendly working colleague. With my dear friends, if they say to me, Fred, what do you think? I will tell them in all candor because they know where it's coming from. But with everyone else, there's a certain kind of formality, which I think is a good thing, this formality, so that we know where the lines are drawn and the divisions exist, because sometimes it can become compromising. So an artist I'm friendly with, we're not close friends, but we certainly are friendly and have done things together. I sent him an email a couple of years ago because I imagined that he would do a particular role well that I'm sure no one has ever offered him for any number of reasons. And I said, look at it. And if you think this is something that's interesting, we can talk about it further if you want to go deeper into the role. And I also happened to put in the ear of an arts manager that I think this artist would be very good in that opera. So we'll see if that happens, because if this artist never does it, if he doesn't warm up to the role, fine. I know he has it in his voice, but it's a very different temperament. The character is a different temperament than what he plays. This is a very nice, likable man, and he plays nice, likable characters. This character that I recommended is a little ambiguous, and I think it might be an interesting artistic stretch and growth for this tenor to look at that particular role. But I also know that if I say something and they say no, that's fine. That's really fine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not that I would then go to another tenor and say, hey, I think this role is good for you, because it would not be.
Yes.
But it would be just interesting for the person involved, which means that in your work, to some degree in my work, a lot of it is about thinking about the potential, about the possibilities for an artist and a theater and maybe a conductor and a role and an opera. And sometimes it would be something famous like Tosca, but a lot of times it would be something just at the margins of the standard repertory that is waiting for the right artist to come back and reintroduce it. So do you do this now in your head the way sports fans think of the scores of Paris Saint-Germain, or do you do this about opera singers and roles and so forth? Fantasy is what I'm saying, fantasizing and reassociating.
Yes. But you have to be humble, because sometimes you have ideas and singers says no, no. So it's for me, this way to have lunch and discuss was more to know about what the projects are, and I was always telling the singers, do not hesitate to give me news about what you do. And they said, oh, but we don't care. We don't care. Yes, they do care. We don't dare, because it would be too pushy, too insisting. I said, please do it, because sometimes we are overwhelmed by the work, and sometimes you are looking for Melisande or whatever, and you said, oh, why didn't I think of her, or of, and you just tell me, Isa, I am singing L'Heure Espagnole at La Scala, I am singing Don Giovanni in Hamburg, and it gives ideas, it keep feeding the mémoire and the souvenir. So, but I am kind of humble about with talking with singers, because they very often know. They know. I always say to a singer, you have your your conseil d'administration, your board.
Your
and
board.
Board. You have your agent. You can have your wife, husband, or not. You have your PR, because it's important. But the president of the board is you. So you are the one deciding.
Yeah.
And they know.
I think more established singers know, but young artists who are just starting out don't know, and they grasp around and they reach for help, for support. And sometimes they will sign up with a manager who will say, and by manager, I mean representative, not the manager of a company. And that manager will say, this is what you should do. And I've seen careers ruined, especially dramatic tenors, held in tenors, where their careers are ruined and they're gone in 5 years. And then the next one is brought in, whereas other better advised and better trained artists have 40-year careers because they're able to sustain that. Someone like Carita Mattila has sung for a long time and has evolved with her voice and her age and her temperament, and continues to do remarkable work, but she doesn't do what she sang 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Of course, yes.
And so she's smart, is what I'm saying.
Margarita, yes.
In addition to being fantastic, she's also very smart and stubborn in a good way. I think she's very firm in her ideas, but not everyone has that. When she was a young woman, she was very eager and willing, but she knew when to say no.
I have a story to tell you about Carita, but I must open to the little dog. Give me a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I will say that in the meantime, her beautiful little dog was in that green basket in the back on the right side on your screen, and jumped out and is now somewhere below Isabelle's feet. Where's your dog?
She had to go outside, so she was begging me. So I'm sorry, I had to go there. I remember. Let me tell you a little story about Carita. Carita made her debut in France, in Strasbourg, and I remember I was Diane. I was as I was working in the opera agency before. I met a colleague whose name was Diana Mulligan. Diana Mulligan was she was looking like Princess Diana. She was blushing. She was adorable. She was wonderful. And I was, at the time I left the agency, as you know, and I was in Strasbourg. And we chat, and she told me, Isabelle, I have this young artist. She is very, very promising. Her name is Carita Mattila. She has to sing. She has a project to sing Così fan tutte with Abbado, but we need a theater where she can try it for the first time. Would you like? And so I went to see my boss, René Terrasson, at the time, and I said, he trusted me. So he told me, okay, let's take her. And that was Carita starting her first Fior di Ligi in Strasbourg in don't know when it was, and she was, and we had a very wonderful friendship.
Yeah.
I don't see her enough, but I think I'm going to see her because she's going to sing in Salome in October at the Paris Opera. So
But as Herodias, not as Salome. Yes,
yes.
that's what I mean, is that she was the Salome of her generation. She was a fantastic, amazing Salome. She did a new production here at the Met that was just extraordinary.
Yes.
But then she knows when to put Salome or Yennefer to the side and play other characters in the same operas that are not the leading characters, but nonetheless are wonderful when you play them as played by Carita Matula. And that's exactly what I mean about intelligence to prolong a career, not artificially, but artistically.
Mm-hmm.
And she certainly has done that. And she's one of those artists where I fly, when I can, anywhere to see her do whatever she's doing. So I saw her Wozzeck in London, or was it Paris? I think Wozzeck was London and Ariadne was Paris, whatever it was, wherever she is, I go. Because she's so thrilling. And recently I saw her, the dog came back. Recently in San Francisco, she played the Kostelnichka in Yennefer. She was an amazing Yennefer, but she was an equally amazing Kostelnichka, second only to Leonie Rieseneck, who was, I mean, she was a model in all kinds of things. And maybe the relationship that you had with Régine Crespin, I had with Leonie Rieseneck to some degree. Marilla Franey gave me a lot of advice, but the intensity of the relationship, I think that's what I had with Rieseneck. Did you know Rieseneck? Did you work with her?
I did work for her, but she was already the famous Leonie, and she was such a wonderful and loving woman, and I heard her singing Kundry in Bayreuth, and I heard her singing. I didn't hear her as Kaiserin, but I heard her singing Chrysothemis at the Paris Opera in the 74, 76.
So Kaiserin being the Frauenerschatten, the prince, I forget what she's called now in English, but the high soprano role, the noble role, as opposed to the Dyer's wife, which was often Birgit Nielsen, Christa Ludwig.
In French, it would be l'impératrice. So in English,
the empress. Yeah. But she was her heart, as we say in English, was always on her sleeve. She was very vulnerable. She was very honest. When she felt that she did not give a good performance, she would come out. She once in New York came out and spoke to the audience and apologized. I know I was not good tonight. I'm as Tosca. I'm sorry. I promise I will do better next time. The audience loved her for that. And I remember, let's see if I know the date, February 26, 1984 was her 25th anniversary gala at the Met. And by that point, we were close and had done a lot of things together. And the audience would not let her go at the end. And they were crying and screaming, Leonie. And she came to the apron, to the edge of the stage, and reached out and touched every hand, kind of like a political famous politician who was beloved, like a Nelson Mandela. Everyone reaching, the theater cheering. When she made her farewell to the Met, it was as the old countess in Pique Dame. And we had young artists then like Dmitry Vorostovsky, Ben Heppner, and they all knew Maria Gulagina, and they were all present for a moment of history. And people can go on YouTube and write Leonie Rieseneck farewell to the Met and watch as the audience kept calling her back for more and more and more. Although there have been many, many great beloved artists here in New York, including Leontine Price, the only one who I think comes close in that level of love, Sutherland in her way, Nielsen in her way, but something about Rieseneck in the New York audience was very particular. And I mean, we can say this now. when she did those performances, she was already very ill. She had bone cancer, and at that time kept it secret. And I knew, and if her husband, Ernst Ludwig, knew, and a few people knew, but very few people knew. And we were all just there to help her get through it. And that seemed to be it for the career. But then she announced that she was going to do Clytemnestra in Electra with Hildegard Behrens. And I believe it was supposed to have been George Schulte, but then he didn't conduct, someone else conducted, and in Salzburg. And I flew from New York to Munich and connected to Salzburg to be present for the last performance of her career. I can't imagine any other artist, maybe Carita Mattila, that I might do that for if we know when the last performance is. There was just something so extraordinary about her as a person that made audiences, made people who work on Planet Opera want to do everything they could to support her. She never asked for it.
No, they never asked for. I think at this level of love, we can, of course, add Régine, who had people traveling from all over the place to hear her. So those are les monstres sacrés. They have something special. And Leonie, my God, yes, she did have it.
Yeah.
Behrens had something like that.
Hildegard Behrens certainly did. Yeah.
It's something that has to do also with some, I mean, with vulnerability, with being sincere, with being true on stage, and not fabricated puppet with a gorgeous voice and no heart here. Leonie had a heart.
Do you know about the Lotte Lehmann ring? Do you know about that?
I know, no, the Lotte Lehmann ring, no, tell me.
No, but I don't mean the ring cycle. I mean...
No, I know.
Yeah. So let's tell it. Do you want to tell it or shall I tell it?
Oh, no, I don't know the story, please.
Okay, so Lotte Lehmann, magnificent German soprano, director Régine Crespin as the Marschallin, was a teacher at Music Academy of the West, was very close with Marilyn Horne at Music Academy of the West. My father in 1962 traveled to Santa Barbara to be present for classes with Lotte Lehmann. She was at that level of greatness. As a singer, as an actress, as a person, I never saw her perform. But when she retired, she took off a ring that was beloved to her and gave it to Leonie Rieseneck and said that you are the inheritor of this tradition and you should keep the ring as long as you believe that you should possess it, and at the right moment you should pass it on. And Rieseneck, when she knew she was dying, in those performances in Salzburg, gave the ring to Hildegard Behrens, who she felt was the natural inheritor of the ring. Hildegard Behrens sadly died of an aneurysm in, I believe, in Vienna.
In Tokyo. She died in Tokyo.
In Tokyo, you're right. But she's buried in Vienna, along with Leonie, and left in her will the ring to be given.
Hildegard is buried in Vienna?
Yep. I've left flowers at the grave. Yes, I do know that. Yeah.
Good. No, okay.
Which is interesting because she was German, but she's buried in Vienna.
Okay.
And Hildegard left the ring, the Lotte Lehmann ring, to Waltraud Meyer, who is a wonderful natural heir, and I want her to possess it and use it and love it. But I think the next one should be Carita Mattila. That's just my opinion. In terms of the line of these women who had a certain combination of artistic gifts, but artistic personality, all of that I think we can see the line: Lotte Lehmann, Leonie Rieseneck, Hildegard Behrens, Waltraud Meyer, Carita Mattila. I wonder who we're not making artists like that nowadays. And that's not a criticism, but I think that these women all came from a certain kind of tradition. They were shaped by war in Europe to some degree, less Carita Mattila than the others, but Waltraud Meyer certainly, and especially Rieseneck and Behrens, and certainly Lotte Lehmann. But maybe with the way the world has evolved politically, socially, Maybe Nina Stemma, but it's different. It's a different kind of temperament. And that's no criticism of Nina Stemma, but it's a different flavor than some of the others.
And I would put Nina in those big, high people,
certainly artistically, musically, but there was something I love Nina Stemma's work, don't get me wrong, but it's a different kind of temperament than the women I mentioned. I think. I could be wrong.
I see what you mean. I mean,
yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Nielsen didn't have that temperament.
No, because they are more warriors than.
Yeah, exactly.
They are more Brünnhildes than Sieglinde. Okay.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
we adore Brünnhilde, but we love Sieglinde. Because
Behrens was a Brünnhilde, but of a different flavor.
Yes. Yeah. Very different. Yes, I agree with you.
And I bring this up because, and this is no complaint, but I meet young people all the time who are interested in opera, and they ask me to point them to singers, to artists, to directors, and so on, working now. And I agree with that, because I don't want them to think that opera is just in the past.
No,
the fact that I was formed by the Tito Gobis, Morella Frainies, and Joan Sutherlands, and Marilyn Horns, and Kiri Takanoas, and Leontine Prices, Martina Royals, those are the people who gave me a taste for opera, and Régine Crespin, and Eleanor Bratsova, Luciano Pavarotti, etc., Jose Carreras, Placido Domingo, John Vickers, Alfredo Kraus, more than
Fred, this is the golden age of the opera. But what I am 100 million thousand. I'm telling you, the opera is not dying.
No.
Time when I was at the Met, when I heard those singers, and you said, "My God!" When you hear Elsa, whom I'm very close to, Elsa van den Heever, when you have this young Norwegian soprano, Lise Davidsen, you have this generation of singers, and they're all there. And in Europe, when you go, it's amazing. It's wonderful. So the new one are coming. They are already there. And the newest of the new are rising.
Yep. We see them all the time. But, and this is no criticism, but they're different in terms of I think they're better musicians, they're more proficient, they can do things with their voices, but they're not necessarily anchored to the tradition that we still saw with the Behrens and Amatila, even as they broke new ground.
Well,
or Deborah Boyd.
Yes, but this is where working with coaches is so important. This is why you go and work with somebody who knows the tradition, who can, because those singers, those artists, it's like it's like you put water on the plant and then they grow, and you feed them. You tell them, please listen to Lotte Lehmann singing that, or listen to George London singing this, and they get it. Coaches are wonderful, and the big houses like the Met, like Vienna, like Paris, they have coaches who know how to feed those young souls. So I am. They will know, and they will surprise us. I'm very positive about it.
I'm glad to hear that. I am too, because people always say to me, "Oh, opera's dying." No, it's not. I recently went to a performance in New York of the rock band The Who, and the audience was older for that concert than they are for the opera audience at the Met, which is younger. The Who audience was all in their 70s and 80s, except for me.
Of course. Yes.
Whereas at the opera in New York, and certainly in France and Germany and elsewhere, but especially in France, you see young audiences. I love that in France, it's financially possible for young people to have access to an opera so that they learn, they continue, they become articulate. One of them, some 16-year-old boy or girl in France, will fasten on, pick your singer today, Nadine Sierra, whoever you want, and say, Nadine, this is what I think you should be doing. And Nadine will say, don't ever say that to me again, but I can be your friend. And that's how this happened.
This is, yes. Now let's talk about Nadine. Let's talk about this new generation is just amazing.
Yeah.
And also it's also to run a house now. I see the work that my friend Valérie Chevalier does here at the Montpellier Opera House. She opens the house to many different art forms. And because of that, they go, and those young people there, and they go and come Aida or Orphée or Werther, and I don't know what, they are breaking our traditional rules, and we need that.
Yeah.
I don't know now if I would be, to run an opera house the way I was doing it, me as number 2, not as number 1, but it doesn't matter. I don't know if I would know how to do it now, because I know how it works, but now the serrure, how do you call the thing to open I don't have the right keys. Keys now are electronic. I still have the old keys, but you need another brain than the one that I have. Yeah. And people follow. We have to trust the new generation, definitively.
In Italian, the expression is "largo ai giovani," make way for the young people. I agree with that, certainly, as in make a place for the young people. But frankly, people like the two of us, and not just the two of us, who love the art form and are knowledgeable and have a longer perspective, I think we bring something to Planet Opera, especially to the younger artists, that they can't get elsewhere. The coaches who have worked with artists for decades, some of the older people in theaters, I've seen, whether because it's required retirement at the age of 65 in some European theaters, the Met historically had a tradition of keeping very old people on staff. We would have, for example, Walter Tausig, a conductor who was still teaching and conducting and coaching at the age of 93. And he was a direct connection to Richard Strauss and could bring that knowledge, and to Carl Böhm and so on. And Tausig taught another generation of teachers in addition to singers, and that got passed on. Recently in Ireland, Veronica Dunn, who was the great national singing teacher, at the Royal Irish Academy of Music, Deborah Kelleher, the president, had the brilliant idea to not only have Veronica Dunn teach young singers, but teach a generation of singing teachers, so that the Veronica Dunn method of education, of tutelage, of singing and history and culture of opera and song continues all over Ireland. And there are dozens and dozens of Veronica Dunn educated singing teachers who are now teaching a nation to sing. And that's very, very important. And one of the reasons I do this program is to document things with people like you. You know, I also have had many young people on as my guests, and that's wonderful. But sometimes to have someone with more experience who can talk about things with the longer view that you and I have taken today. And with that in mind, I want you to talk about two artists who I adore, who have been put on your list of recommended performers. One of them, Brigitte Fassbinder, and the other, José Van Damme, both of a generation of superb artists, but even in that generation, they were very special.
Listen, I never really met personally Brigitte Fassbinder, but she brought the leader form. She habited it so intensely. It's like, you know, it's like the French melody. If you sing them like a little bit old-fashioned, it's just boring and over exaggerated. When Régine was bringing this is natural, that like a natural flow. And Fassbender had this way to sing Schubert like with this flame. And José Van Damme, I know because it's because of Golo and
In Pelléas et Mélisande, yeah.
Pelléas et Mélisande, who had this noblesse and vulnerability as well. I heard him singing very often. I don't know him really personally, but they were feeding my emotions when I was listening records. But you know, very often I say, I don't listen anymore records, because if I want, I close my eyes here and I can hear Le Trio de Rosenkavalier with 3 different singers in my mind, and it's just, I can hear that. I don't need to listen. I mean, yes, of course I do need to listen records or music, but it's where when you are so, but Fassbender is really one of my beautiful interpret for those Brahms or those Schubert songs.
What's very interesting about her, after a very long and wonderful career as a recitalist and an opera singer, she then became the head of a very fine theater in Innsbruck and ran it for quite a few years, and now is the head of the Richard Strauss Summer Festival in Garmisch in southern Germany. And she had another chapter in her career of being one of the first singers who becomes an arts administrator. Now we're seeing, especially with the pandemic, many singers in their 40s and 50s thinking about their next chapter and are affiliating with companies such as Morris Robinson in Cincinnati and Russell Thomas in Los Angeles and Christine Gerke in Detroit and many, many more. But Brigitte Fassbender was ahead of all these people in not only doing it for a year or two, but having a very long and very successful tenure. José Van Damme is one of my favorites. He was a magnificent Mozartian. Leporello particularly was just remarkable. I was involved in the production of the film that had Kiri Takano and Etta Moser and Ruggero Raimondi. That's how I came in, was through Raimondi, who I worked with in Italy.
And Saint François d'Assise, Le Messiaen.
Also Messiaen.
Oh, this is gorgeous.
But I want to tell a story about Van Damme because I think it's important you understand this, but I think that young singers understand this and audience members. Very late in his singing career, and Van Damme was a bass baritone, he's still alive, but as a singer was a bass baritone. He was a beautiful recitalist, and he came for one last recital tour in America. And he, on the day that he was supposed to sing what was his farewell concert in New York, had either a terrible cold or a cough or something. And other singers would have canceled. They did not want their lasting impression to be that they were sick. Van Damme announced, or had it announced, that he had a cold or congestion or whatever, but did not want to leave New York without one last time with his audience. And what he did with no voice that day was a demonstration of such exquisite artistry that he knew enough about what he didn't have that day. He had 5 notes basically, but he made those 5 notes. He didn't change the program, count. He knew where he would have a croaking sound or not much breath like that. And he would work it into the artistic expression of the thing that he was singing. It was one of the most unforgettable concerts that I've ever been to, recitals, not because he was at his best, but the demonstration of artistry when he was very compromised. And I think there are very few people who could have done that.
Yes.
And so if younger listeners and even older listeners who don't know the artistry of José Van Damme, Belgian, please go deep, a deep immersion on Adagio into the work of José Van Damme, because he's a singer's singer. He's one of those people who people in opera admire greatly. James Levine loved working with José Van Damme, but is not as famous as I think he deserves to be. So I have one more question for you, my dear. Did I leave anything out?
Oh, we could keep talking and talking and talking about, no, I think we said everything.
But I just want to make sure that anything that it would have been important to you to cover. I think we covered extensively the world of opera in France. Talk about young French singers right now. Who are people that we people outside of France should look for and listen for?
You need to, okay, la génération de Ludovic Thésier being already well known, you have to listen only 2 names. You have to listen, you know Benjamin Bernheim, who is going to make something. This young tenor called also Stanislas de Barberac, and this young baritone called Florian Sampé. Those are, and they are even newer coming that I don't have in mind, or I haven't heard them recently. But those 3 who already are the fit on the career, we have to they are going to make something.
Actually, I just sort of someone I wanted to ask you about. I've never met her. I've never worked with her. I admire her from afar, but she's a very particular figure. And if I pronounced her name wrong, you correct me. Nathalie Stutzmann.
Nathalie Stutzmann, but now she's probably one of the best conductors.
But where did she begin?
Sorry?
What were her origins in her musical career? Not as a conductor.
Not as
a conductor.
No, not as a conductor. She is from the East, and her parents are very famous.
The East of France, yeah.
France, sorry, from Nancy. And her mother was Christiane Stutzmann, and the father were both singers. And they had Nathalie, who started very young and very adored in Paris. She was at the Young Artist Program of the Paris Opera, and she had this very rare voice of contralto, and she's super smart, super smart, musician like she invented it, and she always wanted to go further. She is a born musician, but like perfectly not, and she wanted to one day because her voice has a very repertoire was very, I would say, limited, because it's and she wanted to go further and further, and she took some conducting classes, and she is doing extremely well as a conductor. So she is somebody to count now on the world of.
In fact, she's become music director of the Atlanta Symphony, and next April, May, and early June, she will direct not 1 but 2 new productions at the Met. That's a first, I think. First, she's doing Don Giovanni, and then Die Zauberflöte.
Yeah, she was to do it during COVID time, and that was postponed for the. Yeah, let's touch wood.
Yes, I'm touching wood right now. And there's another Nathalie I want to talk to you about, someone who I love, I've worked with somewhat, Nathalie Dessay. And what's interesting about Nathalie Dessay, extraordinary artist, singer, and so forth, but who at a certain point understood or decided that that's it as a singer, but she continues as a performer. And I know that she's coming to Bordeaux to do a program of Proust, and I don't know whether it's Proust spoken dialogue, whether it's song, but what I want to ask you about Nathalie Dessay is how an artist sometimes is intelligent enough to know when to stop and how to evolve a career, but to keep working, which it seems to be what she's doing.
Natalie is a performer for sure. She was one of those fantastic coloratura soprano of the world. And I think Natalie was maybe also limited by her voice, who was putting her in the category of singing those crazy ladies or soubrette or lighter personage. And I'm sure that Natalie would have loved, I mean, no, I'm not sure. This is me, but she would have loved to sing much more important. I'm sure that she would have loved to sing Isolde, let's say. Maybe she will tell me you are mad. I never want to sing. Of course, she cannot sing Isolde, but you know, she is a stage animal. So to just do something that she can do, Salome, for instance.
Yeah.
But okay, that is to say that Natalie was always at a big wish to big envie to sing crazy parts, and she's doing that now as a performer. Mm-hmm. And it's always going to be very musical. Whatever she does, she gets the audience. She's one of those animals. Yes,
she is terrific. I once said to her that, you know, the Met has a magnificent production of Poulenc's Dialogue des Carmélites that many great artists, including Régine Crespin, have appeared in. And I once said to Natalie to say, haven't you ever considered Constance, Sister Constance? And she went, not interesting for me.
Blanche, probably.
Yeah. But, you know, Constance being the higher voice and so on.
Of course.
Not interesting for me.
She wants to do the thing with big drama, which I completely understand.
And that's what you mean. And this is your point. Singers know. Most singers know.
Yes.
And occasionally artistic directors know, you have contributed richly to Planet Opera and to audiences, even if they didn't know you. And that's why it was my honor and pleasure to have people get to know you today. It's gotten very dark in Montpellier. We've just had a huge...
I don't dare, because it's almost 10.
We just had a huge thunderstorm in New York, so it got very dark here, but now it's passed.
Yes, I should have gone out or have remote things to put the lights on.
That's okay. Isabelle, merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, je t'embrasse.
Moi aussi.
I hope to see you again in New York. À la prochaine.
Okay.
A very happy 14th